time for another installment of the Psychomagnetic Self-Talk series, okay? And today, what we're going to be talking about, as we always do in this series, is how we shift our attraction and repulsion to different things. Like if you want to learn how to shift how you feel about things so that you can then ultimately shift your actions and then shift your results, well then, that's what this series is all about. And in particular, today, we're talking about a very, very important topic in relation to all of this, which is shifting your belief system, okay? Because your beliefs are the limiter of your self-talk, all right? Your self-talk can only get you so far if your beliefs are stuck being, in a dysfunctional, limiting sort of configuration. And so if you've got limiting beliefs, then we need to learn how to reconfigure them. And it's not an immediately obvious how to do this. And so that's what I'm going to be doing in this video, is breaking down that process so that you guys can find your limiting beliefs and, replace them with empowering ones. Before we get into the specifics of that, let's do a quick recap of what we've covered so far, okay? We started out by talking about you need to just learn how to engage in a conversation with yourself, learn how to translate your emotions into words and then respond to them. But then we also talked about how all right, if you really want those responses to have any power, you got to get into the meat of whatever sort of emotions you're dealing with. Okay, because if your emotions are kind of, they're really intense, but you're not feeling them, well, then your self-talk isn't going to penetrate deep enough in order to actually make a difference. So if you want to understand more about this stuff and how you do that, then watch the previous episodes of this series. The big thing that we want to focus on here is that your self-talk will only be as effective as your belief system lets you. Okay. Otherwise, you're going to keep running into those limiting beliefs and not being able to get anywhere. So, for example, all right, let's say you're trying to quit porn. This is something that I help a lot of my guys with, and you believe that you need porn. All right, this is a very common belief. This is something that I've had, and anyone who's used porn for a long period of time, they quit for a few days, and all of a sudden they start having these serious withdrawal symptoms. Their life sucks. They get depressed. They're filled with all these itchy cravings. They get irritable, all that kind of crap. And so, if you want to get the assumption that then builds inside them, the belief that builds inside them is that, oh, clearly I need this thing in order to be okay. And as long as that belief's there, well then, eventually, you're going to give back into it, because if you believe you need something, then you're not going to deny yourself that thing, right? Another one would be something like, this is one I faced with video games, okay? When I was first trying to limit or cut out video games or whatever, I just thought that I believed that I needed them to be happy, because growing up in my life, those were always one of the highest sources of stimulation and enjoyment, and in many ways, even connection with the people who I would play with. And so, as long as I believed that was the case, guess what? I wasn't going to be able to let them go. This, it expands into every sort of scenario. It can happen around money. It can happen around women. If you believe that you're never going to be able to succeed financially, or you're never going to be able to succeed with your business, well, then eventually your actions are going to take a turn for the self-sabotaging. You're either just going to give up too early, or you're going to take, poor decisions that lead you to not make money, right? It's your thoughts will always follow the beliefs that you've internalized. And if your thoughts follow it, then your emotions will, and then your actions will. The whole thing is going to go in the direction of your belief, right? Same thing with women, all right? If you believe that no woman will ever really love you, well, then you are going to constantly show up in ways that either create distance between you and women or outright repel them. So, beliefs are at the heart of everything. And it doesn't matter how good your self-talk is if the beliefs stay stuck. Even if you do succeed, but the belief doesn't shift, you won't feel the success. So here's what I mean by that. Imagine this, or you don't even need to imagine, this is something that actually happens a lot. People, they get to high, status positions, maybe in their company or their job or whatever. But they do it because they get there because they know how to do the work. But if their belief system is that they're not good enough, or I'm an imposter, then even though they are succeeding, they don't feel the success. And in some ways, it actually ends up making them more anxious and nervous because they don't feel like they deserve the success. They feel like they're constantly getting ready to be found out, right? So ultimately, what we want to do is we want to discard these limiting beliefs and we want to replace them with empowering beliefs. And the way that we're going to do that is with self-talk. That's the whole purpose of this series. But there's a kind of targeted sort of self-talk that you got to understand the game of in order to pull it off. All right. So the first thing, it starts like with most self-talk is that you have to be able to know what it is that is going on, right? You have to be able to translate whatever sort of limitation you're experiencing into words so that you can identify what the limiting belief is. All right. So let's say, for example, that you're trying to build a side business. Okay. And when it comes time for you to sit down and work on it, you feel all this resistance. It's like, I don't want to work on it. I don't want to do it. And you start translating those emotions into words. And what pops out is, I don't think I'll really succeed on this path. So what's the point of trying at all? Okay. Well, that's a big old fat limiting belief, right? And so we got to shift that. And so what you do is you then respond, right? You try and say, well, I actually can succeed by doing X, Y, and Z. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes just the self-talk right there is enough. You can just respond rationally, offer a different perspective, and then boom, you're good. Okay. And if that's the case, then it's because either that belief wasn't very internalized or there wasn't much risk involved, much change involved. Usually the longer you hold a belief and the more you operate on it and the more that shifting that belief would require you to change your life, the more resistance you'll feel. And sometimes the deeper it's buried as well. And so if you want help with that, figuring out exactly what are the key beliefs that need to be shifted inside of you, and you want to be able to do it in a very structured way, then make sure you check out my Metascript Method Guide. It's a journaling technique which a lot of guys have used to transform their lives, and you can get that for free by checking out the free guides link in the description below. So, all the work that we do with self-talk is really supercharged by the Metascript method. So check that out if you haven't. Let's say you're dealing with something deeper, something that can't just be shifted by, a basic rational response. Okay. If that's the case, then there's kind of like two pieces to it. All right. You have to develop the new belief consciously, and then you have to install it. All right. So developing the new belief is pretty straightforward. It's just like identify a better way to look at your current circumstances. And you just want to have it rooted in rationality and truth as much as you possibly can. So for example, like imagine a guy says, he has the belief that he's doomed to fail with women because he's failed repeatedly in the past with women. Okay. And let's look at this rationally. All right. Just rationally, let's respond to this. Well, all right. If you keep asking the same women that you've already failed with, and those women stay the same, and you also stay the same, well, then it stands to reason that you will keep getting the same result. Okay, right. So if you keep doing that, well, then yes, you're probably doomed to still fail. But what if we change something? What if you are asking different women? What if you work on yourself? What if you change the way you show up? Well, if we've got all different circumstances, well, then is it rational to assume that we will get the exact same result repeatedly? No. And this is why, we gotta think about this stuff. Like if you're holding a belief that's irrational, then all you have to do is present rationality to it. And so, if we were to take it even further and say, well, what if you actually are focused on becoming a man who really works on himself and improves himself and improves his social interaction and goes after better and better and better women? Well, the chances of you succeeding are much higher. It's not certain 100% that, the next woman you talk to is going to be the one, but like you can develop a significant degree of certainty that you will be able to find at least someone. All right. Likely many women, many women could likely fit the bill. And so that's the basis of the new belief. The new belief is that, all right, there's plenty of women out there for me as long as I show up as the guy that I want to be and I keep working on myself. I just need to find them. That would be the new belief. And you need to be able to hold the new belief rationally, succinctly in your mind. Okay. And so now it comes into the part of installing the belief. you got to identify the right time to trigger this belief. All right. First, it's helpful just to have it floating in your mind in general, but really where you really need it is at those junction points, those critical points where you're choosing to either go left or right. So for example, if we're dealing with the dating belief, then the time that you're going to want to really tune into this idea is when you're about to go out and ask a girl out, or you're about to get on your dating app, or you're about to head to the club, or whatever it is that you're doing that is related to dating. Okay, and you want to tell yourself, hey, there's plenty of women out there for me. I just need to find them. Okay. Now, when you present this new belief, if this requires you to face some sort of risk, and so in this example, it'd be the risk of rejection. Okay, your emotional mind is going to put up a test. All right, and here's what you got to understand about your emotional mind is that it cannot think rationally. All right, it can't. It doesn't have the machinery for it. That's why it's our emotional mind and not our rational mind. It can feel things, but it cannot do complex rational operations. So how does it know whether it should accept a new belief or not? How does it generate enough trust to let that belief in? Because, our emotional minds, it's trying to protect us in a lot of ways. It's trying to keep us from doing something stupid. It's your emotional mind's built upon, lots of, millions of years of evolutionary instinct, also combined with our past experiences, also combined with, other aspects of our biology. So it's like, it's got this big complex thing that, it's trying to keep you alive. And in order to get you to do something different that goes against the trends that you've been following, it's going to need some proof. And the way that gets that proof is by offering emotional resistance that your rational mind has to then pass through. That's the test. You can think of it almost like as an internal shit test, if you're familiar with that concept. It's like your rational mind needs to prove to your emotional mind that it's really thought this through. And the way it does that is by choosing to still act in the face of this emotional resistance, right? Because you're not going to push through emotional resistance unless you have really thought it through. You have to know that this is the better path for you. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to engage in that emotional override. But as you do that, the moving through that resistance, that creates a psychological conditioning event. Your brain needs to have moments of intensity, of either extreme pain or pleasure or stress or whatever in order to make changes. And if we're trying to change your beliefs and really internalize a new one, then we need to create a neurochemical event. And it's you moving through this resistance while holding your new belief. That's what creates the event. Okay? And so this happens in layers. It doesn't even happen all at once. It's usually not even just like this one-time thing you got to push through. You're probably going to have to do it multiple times. The example that I use a lot is this idea of like when you delete something on your computer, right? It's like first time you delete it, it seems easy, but it doesn't actually get deleted. It just goes to the recycling bin. And then if you want to delete the recycling bin, well, then you got to, put in your password or, give it admin authorization. And then, if you want to delete it on the deepest sub-levels of your memory system, you got to, have even deeper root access, right? So it's like a similar thing happens when you're trying to change your beliefs. And the more integral that belief has been in your life, the more times you're going to have to show up and pass that test because your emotional mind is basically being like, are you sure you want to change this? Are you still sure? How's it working out? Is it working out good for us or not? Or maybe we got to go back to the old thing because, again, our emotional mind can't think rationally. All it can have is the experiences. And so you're probably going to have to pass that test more times, especially if there's not an immediate reward. So like, for example, if you overcome a limiting belief, you push through it, and then you're immediately rewarded with like a massive win, well, then you might not need to push through again because that massive win that makes you feel really good, that's a neurochemical event that, drives this new belief home and really helps install it. But if it's something where the big payoff is a gentler thing or something that happens over time, so for example, quitting porn, okay, you're going to have to push through significant resistance each time you're confronted with a craving. And the reason why you're going to have to do that is because the big payoff of living a porn-free life doesn't happen immediately. It's something that really accumulates and builds over time. And that's why you need to actually pass that test many times in that sort of scenario. And so, but like as you do that, essentially what ends up happening is you start internalizing the evidence of how the new belief serves you, right? And so that's how it works, right? So if we're going to summarize it, okay, if you want to change a belief, well, you got to find the limiting belief, and you do that through translating whatever resistance or pain or sadness or fear or frustration, whatever it is, whatever the negative thing is, you translate it into words, you identify the limiting belief underneath it all, okay? And you might need to do a little detective work, a little journaling to really distill that down. But, basically you can say, all right, if my emotions are saying this, well, then what must I believe on some level of my being that's getting in the way here? Okay, so once you find that belief, then you got to come up with a rational response. Okay, and you can do this just by thinking it through logically. It's like, all right, well, how rational is this belief? Is there a better way to look at the situation? Okay, and you learn and you make that concise and clear. And then when you're confronted with that critical point of, are you going to go left or are you going to go right? Are you going to follow the old belief or are you going to follow the new belief? Well, you have to rationally present the new belief, which will inspire the new action. And then you got to pass that emotional test where it says, your emotional mind says, all right, that's way different than what we know. Here's a bunch of resistance. If you push through that, then I can trust that you've really thought about it, and we'll think about internalizing this. And then you just got to do that enough times until the belief is internalized. You've gathered enough evidence, and boom, your beliefs have shifted, and you no longer need to fight them. And in fact, they will start working for you. So, you don't want to focus on trying to make, when you're doing this belief work, don't try and focus on making it feel perfect. Because a lot of times, like I said, it's still going to feel uncomfortable. You got to focus on just getting it to a position where you're willing to act on the new belief. Acting on it is what completes the circuit, all right? And if you want to take this process even deeper, then you can check out the cut method, which I will be releasing a video on here soon, which is like a very in-depth sort of technique for dealing with those tough emotional blockages. And I think you guys will get a lot out of that. So, all right, my friends, hopefully you found this useful. If you did, please let me know in the comments below. Please like, please subscribe, and make sure you guys leave a comment as well. Let me know what beliefs you're trying to shift. I would love to hear where you find a limiting belief and what your new empowering belief is as well. I really want to hear that stuff. So make sure you let me know. But that's pretty much what I have for you all today. Thank you so much for coming out, and I'll see you next week in the next one. So keep going. Ooh, yeah.